You're a German soldier. It's 1943. You've been captured by the Americans. You're expecting the worst filthy camps, cruel guards, hunger gnawing at your ribs. After all, you've been told your whole life that Americans are weak, decadent, barely functioning under a broken capitalist system. They're greedy, disorganized, spiritually hollow. That's what the Nazi Party drilled into you since the beginning. You believed it. But then you arrive at the prison camp, and if you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment. Your feedback helps shape what we cover next, and you being here keeps the conversation going. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one. There's Coca-Cola, real Coca-Cola, ice cold, in glass bottles. You're not even sure what it is. Exactly, you've only ever heard the name whispered as some kind of weird American sugar drink, and they're handing it out like water. No strings attached. And it doesn't stop there. There's ice cream, chocolate bars, fresh bread, hot meals with meat, whole trays of food that wouldn't look out of place at a Berlin hotel, except this is a prison. A war prison. You're supposed to be the enemy, but no one's yelling. No one's kicking you. The guards are, dare you say, polite. They ask if you're injured, if you're hungry. You're processed, fed, and then you're led to a clean bunk with a real mattress. You start to wonder, is this some sort of elaborate trick? Are they fattening you up for something worse? Nope. This is the punishment. Turns out, American prison camps didn't just defy expectations, they annihilated them. Because what German POWs were walking into wasn't just a holding facility, it was a buffet of industrial supremacy, logistical brilliance, and pure, unapologetic abundance. It was soft power, served cold, with sprinkles, and it broke them. For many captured German soldiers, the American way of life revealed through soda fountains and milkshakes was the single most psychologically destabilizing thing they had ever seen. Forget bombs. Forget tanks. It was Coca-Cola that cracked the fod of fascism. How did this happen? Why did America treat its enemies so well? And why were the snacks the most powerful weapons in the arsenal? Let's rewind. By the time the United States had fully mobilized for war, its industrial machine was operating on another level entirely. Assembly lines were pumping out everything from bombers to candy bars. Factories ran day and night. The American economy didn't just survive the war, it hit a peak of coordinated chaos that bordered on miraculous. So when it came time to house enemy soldiers, the US military had a surplus of, well, everything. Food, clothing, medical supplies, entertainment, even processed luxuries like chocolate, chewing gum, and canned fruit. German soldiers, raised on state propaganda that painted America as culturally degenerate and economically unstable, couldn't believe what they were seeing. They had just spent years watching their own rations dwindle to black bread and ersatz coffee. In Germany, butter was practically a myth. Sugar was rationed. Meat was for special occasions maybe. And now, they were watching the enemy eat steak. But it wasn't just that Americans had more, it was how they distributed it. Food in American POW camps wasn't reserved for officers or elites. Everyone got the same tray, the same Coke, the same scoop of ice cream. It didn't matter your rank. In Germany, class dictated everything, even in uniform. But here, you're a prisoner, and you're being treated with the kind of democratic dignity you've never experienced before. The impact was immediate and internal. You don't scream it out loud, but inside your head, a voice is whispering, wait, this is what democracy looks like. There are no lectures, no propaganda films, no screaming, officers trying to reform your ideology. Just candy bars, hot meals, and magazines left lying around the recreation hall. The Americans didn't have to tell you their system was superior, they showed you. Every tray of food was a sermon. Every soda was a quiet declaration. This is what freedom builds. And perhaps the wildest part, this wasn't even a deliberate psychological tactic. The US wasn't trying to reprogram anyone. They were just feeding prisoners, according to Geneva Convention standards, and, well, the American standard of feeding happened to involve Coke, cake, and enough calories to fuel a small sports team. Of course, some German officers panicked. They warned their men not to fall for it. This is manipulation, they insisted. Don't be seduced by sweets. But, come on. Try telling a 20-year-old conscript who just spent a month eating boiled turnips that a cold Coke and a chocolate bar are some kind of ideological poison. They didn't fall for it, they opened their eyes. Some POWs wrote letters home describing what they'd seen. Carefully, because censors read everything. But word got out. The Americans have everything, they whispered. It's true what they say. If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment. Your feedback helps shape what we cover next. And you being here keeps the conversation going. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one. The streets might as well be paved with butter. Years later, when those same soldiers returned to a devastated Germany, their memories stayed with them. They remembered the flavor of abundance, the logistics, the structure, the fact that even in war, even in prison, America managed to run smoother than the fatherland did at its peak. That memory didn't fade, it turned into ambition, and it directly influenced what came next. When West Germany began rebuilding, many of the men shaping that recovery had once sat in American camps, watching ice cream melt in the summer sun, marveling at the way Americans had built a society that could do this even for its enemies. They didn't copy the aesthetics of America, they copied its systems. Mass production, consumer goods, logistics, retail structure, standardization. Germany's so-called economic miracle. Yeah, that wasn't just fueled by the Marshall Plan. It was fueled by German men who had tasted peanut butter for the first time in a Texan POW camp and gone home dreaming of factories. And perhaps the most poetic part of all? America didn't have to brag. They didn't have to shove it in anyone's face. The soft power of kindness, abundance, and ice cream on demand did what 1,000 speeches never could. Some POWs later admitted that their entire worldview crumbled, not because of military defeat, but because of the realization that everything they'd been told was a lie. America wasn't weak. Capitalism wasn't failing. The system worked, and it worked for everyone, even the prisoners. Let's not sugarcoat this, though there were bad camps. There were problems. Not every POW experience was a Coca-Cola commercial, but overall, the psychological shift among captured Germans was undeniable. The war had been fought on many fronts, but one of the most unexpected victories came not through bullets or bombs, but through hospitality, efficiency, and the absurdly powerful charm of American junk food. It's almost too perfect. The same nation that would go on to export pop culture, fast food, and soft drinks to every corner of the planet was already doing it, quietly, in the background of a global war, one prison tray at a time. So the next time someone tells you food can't change the world, remind them, it already did. Because somewhere in a dusty archive, there's a letter from a German POW to his family back home. And in that letter, scrawled in careful handwriting, is a line that says something like, "They gave us ice cream every Sunday. Even the guards eat it too." Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this sweet slice of forgotten history, go ahead and hit that like button, share it with someone who thinks dessert is harmless, and drop a comment below. What's your most unexpected, soft power moment in history? And of course, subscribe for more wild stories from the messy, absurd, and oddly delicious corners of history. We've got plenty more where that came from. So here you are, a young German POW, caught somewhere between disbelief and a sugar coma, sipping your third Coca-Cola of the day, and it still hasn't sunk in. You're trying to process how your captors, the ones your government told you were morally bankrupt, soulless capitalists with no discipline, have not only outproduced your country, but out-organized, out-fed, and frankly, out-vibed it too. It's like being cast in a movie where the villain gives you a 5-course meal, a blanket, and a friendly nod, and you start wondering if you're even in the right role anymore. Back home in Germany, life was grim. Cities reduced to rubble, civilians scraping by on turnips and powdered eggs. Propaganda on loop, insisting that the Reich was winning, that sacrifice was noble, that America was on the verge of collapse. But here, collapse looks like a hot lunch and a second helping of mashed potatoes. It smells like cinnamon rolls and bacon. It sounds like swing music drifting from the mess hall radio. Collapse? This doesn't look like a dying empire. This looks like Sunday at Grandma's. It messes with your head. Because even if you're not consciously changing your mind, your body already knows something's off. Your stomach is full. Your boots are dry. You're gaining weight. You're laughing again, laughing, for the first time in what feels like years. Maybe over a dumb card game. Maybe over the fact that someone brought out ice cream again. And the guards? Yeah, they've got guns. But they're not lording it over you. Some of them chat with you, ask where you're from. You learn their names. They toss you a cigarette after work duty. Not out of guilt, just out of habit. And slowly, something terrifying starts to happen. You stop feeling like an enemy. But this was the American secret weapon. The casual normalization of abundance. The nonchalant presentation of freedom and efficiency and comfort. As if to say, oh, you didn't have this back home? And no, you didn't. In Germany, everything was a sacrifice. Scarcity was patriotic. Deprivation meant loyalty. The struggle was baked into the identity. But here, the system worked without making people miserable. That was the magic. And the longer you stayed in that camp, the clearer it became. This wasn't just about America having more stuff. It was about the ease of it. The way everyday life seemed designed to be livable, to be fair, to be scalable. The Coke wasn't just a drink. It was a metaphor for an entire system built around distribution, branding, satisfaction, and shared access. Even ice cream, something so small, was systematized. There were special ice cream barges sent overseas for troops. Military-grade dessert operations. Are you kidding? Meanwhile, back in the fatherland, your people were melting snow for water and cutting bread with sawdust filler. No wonder American abundance didn't just feed your body, it fried your brain. And it wasn't just you. It was everyone. Talk to any POW, and you'd hear the same whispers. Why do they have so much? How are they still smiling? How does their system work like this? Some tried to rationalize it. Well, they're far from the front lines. Or, they just got lucky with resources. Or, it's all fake. It can't last. But deep down, those excuses didn't hold. Not when you saw the scale of things. Not when you saw that even prisoners got a piece of it. There was a story from one camp, maybe it was in Texas or Georgia, where a German soldier asked a guard, in total confusion, "How can your country afford to give all this to prisoners?" And the guard shrugged. "Because we can." No flex. No lecture. Just a simple truth. Because they could. And that answer hit harder than any propaganda film ever could. Because what it meant was, this wasn't a trick. This wasn't for show. This was just America being America. A place where even wartime doesn't shut down the soft serve machine. And if that's what they're giving prisoners, imagine what life's like for citizens. That seed, once planted, didn't die. It grew. Slowly, quietly. You didn't even notice it at first. But over the weeks and months, you started to question things. You didn't need to be re-educated in a classroom. You were being re-educated in the mess hall, one bite at a time. Even the small stuff, the mail system, the organized work schedules, the Red Cross parcels, the Christmas cookies sent by American families, all of it pointed to a society that had figured out how to make things work. Not just in theory, not just for elites, but across the board. And the contrast was damning. Because back home, you'd been taught that order and strength were Germany's virtues. But the longer you spent in the camp, the more it became clear, America had the real order, the real strength. It just didn't need to be loud about it. And that, honestly, was the final twist of the knife. It wasn't just that America was powerful, it was that they didn't have to rub it in your face. They didn't need to humiliate you to prove their superiority. They didn't need parades. They had pudding cups. America's confidence came not from ego, but from competence. And that hit harder than any marching anthem ever could. You saw what dignity felt like even in defeat. And when you returned to the rubble of your homeland, surrounded by chaos and hunger, you couldn't shake the memory of those quiet, clean, efficient camps. The trays of food, the polite guards, the democracy of dessert. It haunted you in a good way. And when the chance came to rebuild, to reshape, to reimagine what Germany could be, that memory was part of the foundation. Because, yeah, America dropped bombs. But they also dropped a new idea of what life could be. Not through speeches, not through threats, through ice cream. And it worked. So the next time someone tells you that war is only about firepower, or that ideology can only be defeated by force, tell them this story. The story of how America, in one of history's most bizarre psychological victories, broke Nazi ideology using nothing but hospitality and high fructose corn syrup. It's one of the strangest, softest, and most unintentionally genius power plays of the 20th century. Because while Germany was still trying to convince its soldiers that hardship was strength, America was proving that comfort could be revolutionary. And when all was said and done, that was the flavor of victory. Alright, let's dig in for one last scoop. Because if the story teaches us anything, it's that the most effective form of influence isn't loud, angry, or overbearing, it's casual. It's confidence served cold. It's when you don't try to dominate someone that you end up changing them completely. And the Germans? They weren't ready. Imagine growing up under a regime that tells you every day that the outside world is collapsing, that America is a place of violence, greed, and dysfunction, that their democracy is weak, their culture is rotten, and their people are suffering under the weight of their own system. Then you get captured, and your punishment is an orderly camp, generous rations, a functioning post office, and a surprisingly good game of baseball. It's one thing to keep order with fear, it's another to keep it with efficiency. And that's what America was flexing in those camps, the power of systems that worked. And that's what got under the skin of so many prisoners. It wasn't just about getting food, it was about getting food on time, about having structure, about seeing a society that could feed thousands of prisoners without chaos, while still fighting a global war. That sticks with you. It did for thousands of returning POWs. When they went home, they walked into a Germany they barely recognized, bombed out cities, hunger, confusion, exhaustion. And then, slowly, those memories came flooding back. They remembered the taste of something better, the sight of a system that didn't need to scream to prove its point. And that memory became a blueprint. These were the men who would help build post-war Germany: engineers, planners, factory workers, economists. They had seen the inside of American industry, even if only the tail end. They had seen how things were run, how abundance could be produced, not just hoarded. They understood that prosperity wasn't some accident of geography, it was a design. They didn't need to love America. That wasn't the point. They just needed to admit, maybe silently, to themselves that the system worked. And then try to bring some of that home. That's the part no one talks about. That beneath all the rubble, all the war crimes trials and international negotiations, the most subversive weapon America ever deployed in that war was normal life. And it worked. Because for many of those men, their worldview didn't collapse in battle. It didn't break in the trenches. It melted quietly in a bowl of peach cobbler, served to them by the very people they were told to hate. There's a strange poetry in that. The idea that after all the speeches, the flags, the marching, and the bloodshed, it was dessert that delivered the final blow. So the next time you think history only moves through violence or grand speeches, remember this. Sometimes, the real revolutions happen in the quiet places. Over a Coke, under a shady tree, inside a prison camp where the enemy stopped being the enemy long enough to share a meal. And sometimes, that's all it takes. If this story hit you like an unexpected brain freeze from the past, make sure to hit that like button, leave a comment below with your thoughts or favorite strange twist in history, and don't forget to subscribe for more wild stories where chaos meets clarity. And hey, next time you have a scoop of ice cream, just remember, somewhere, once upon a time, that was the taste of ideological defeat.